exactly 3:33 in the morning, Eleanor Whitmore woke to the sound of thunder shaking the old manor house. Rain hammered against her bedroom windows while flashes of lightning lit up the dark countryside outside. At first, she thought the storm had simply startled her awake, but within seconds she realized something felt terribly wrong. The room was unnaturally cold, the air heavy and still, and the grandfather clock near her bedroom door had stopped ticking completely. Eleanor slowly sat up in bed, pulling the duvet tightly around herself as she stared into the darkness. Then she heard it. Knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate tapping sound coming from inside her wardrobe. Eleanor froze instantly. The old wardrobe stood across the room beside her mirror, its wooden doors slightly shaking with every distant rumble of thunder. She tried convincing herself it was only the storm or her imagination. But then the knocking came again, louder this time. Along with it came a faint scratching sound, as if someone was dragging their nails against the wood from inside. Her breathing became uneven as she reached for her phone on the bedside table, but the screen refused to turn on. Then a soft whisper floated through the room. "Eleanor." The voice sounded almost exactly like her mother's voice. Her stomach tightened because her parents were away in London for the night. The whisper came again, quieter and slower this time. "Open the door." Eleanor stared at the wardrobe in horror as the brass handle slowly began to move on its own. Every part of her wanted to stay in bed, but curiosity and fear pulled her forward at the same time. Trembling badly, she climbed out from beneath the blankets and stepped onto the freezing wooden floor. The manor groaned around her as thunder echoed outside. The closer she got to the wardrobe, the colder the room became until she could see her breath in the air. Her shaking hand reached toward the wardrobe handle. For several long seconds she hesitated, her heart pounding painfully inside her chest. Then suddenly, the wardrobe door creaked open by itself. Eleanor gasped and stumbled backward. Inside wasn't the back wall of the wardrobe anymore. Instead, there was a long, narrow hallway stretching endlessly into darkness. Dim yellow lights flickered overhead while muddy footprints covered the floor. At the very end of the hallway stood a tall, shadowy figure. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side while its long arms hung motionless beside it. Without warning, the figure began moving toward her. At first it walked slowly, dragging one leg behind it with a horrible scraping sound. But after a few seconds, it began moving faster, then faster still. Suddenly, it sprinted toward her at terrifying speed, its limbs jerking unnaturally as it raced down the hallway. Eleanor screamed and slammed the wardrobe doors shut with all her strength before stumbling backward onto her bed. Her chest burned as she struggled to breathe. Silence filled the room once again. Then she heard footsteps. Downstairs, the footsteps slowly climbed the staircase and stopped outside her bedroom door. A moment later, the door creaked open and her mother stepped inside carrying a steaming cup of tea. Relief flooded through Eleanor instantly. "Mum!" she whispered shakily before rushing forward and hugging her tightly. But the second she touched her, Eleanor froze. Her mother's skin felt freezing cold, colder than the winter air outside. Slowly, her mother wrapped her arms around her and whispered softly into her ear. "Don't look behind you." Every muscle in Eleanor's body tightened instantly. She could hear heavy breathing coming from somewhere near the wardrobe. Against every instinct warning her not to, she slowly turned around. Standing beside the wardrobe was the tall figure from the hallway. It was far larger now, nearly touching the ceiling of her bedroom. Its pale face stretched into a horrifying grin filled with crooked yellow teeth, while its hollow black eyes stared directly at her without blinking. "You opened the door," the creature whispered in a deep, raspy voice. Every light in the bedroom went out at once. Darkness swallowed the room completely. Eleanor could hear only the storm outside and the sound of footsteps moving slowly around her bed. One step, then another. The wooden floor creaked beneath the creature's weight while Eleanor sat frozen in terror. Tears rolled down her face as she squeezed her eyes shut, praying desperately to wake up. Then she felt something cold brush lightly against her ankle. A low, raspy laugh echoed from underneath the bed. Moments later, the lights flickered back on. The room appeared completely empty. Her mother was gone. The creature had vanished. Even the wardrobe stood closed once again as though nothing had happened. Trembling badly, Eleanor grabbed her phone from the bedside table and finally managed to turn it on. But the moment the screen lit up, her blood ran cold. Every contact on the phone had disappeared. Instead, the same message covered the screen hundreds of times. "I can see you." A loud scratching sound suddenly came from the bedroom window. Eleanor turned slowly toward it and nearly screamed. Outside on the rooftop stood dozens of pale figures staring directly into her room. Men, women, and children stood perfectly still beneath the rain, all with blank white eyes and twisted smiles stretching unnaturally across their faces. Slowly, they began tapping their fingers against the glass in perfect rhythm. Tap! 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 Then her phone rang loudly in her trembling hands. A known number flashed across the screen. Eleanor hesitated before answering. At first, there was only crackling static. Then a whisper came through the speaker. "Check under your bed." Eleanor backed away instantly while tears filled her eyes. The tapping at the window became louder and faster. "Look under the bed," the voice repeated, sounding more aggressive this time, slowly. Unable to stop herself, Eleanor knelt beside the bed and lowered her head toward the darkness underneath. At first she saw nothing. Then two glowing eyes suddenly opened inches from her face. A pale hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed her wrist tightly. Eleanor screamed as a twisted, smiling face slowly crawled out. From beneath the bed toward her, she jolted awake with a violent gasp. Sunlight pouring through her bedroom curtains. Birds chirped outside peacefully while the grandfather clock ticked normally once again. Everything looked completely normal. The storm was gone. The wardrobe remained shut. Eleanor let out a shaky laugh, realizing it had only been a nightmare. Still trembling slightly, she reached for her phone beside the bed, but her smile disappeared. Instantly, a new message had appeared overnight from an unknown number. Attached was a blurry photograph of her sleeping peacefully in bed. Standing beside her in the photo was the tall, smiling figure. Her dream. Beneath the picture were for chilling words, *tonight. Open the wardrobe. If you enjoyed this creepy story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Press the bell icon, and don't forget to like, share, and comment on the video.